Hello, welcome to the Desert Blockchain Mini Conference and Team Hack Attack. It's 9:30 a.m. Arizona time on Saturday, April 30th, 2016. And we're going to be having a mini conference this morning, kind of an open conversation about blockchain and distributed network technologies and some other items. And so thank you for tuning in. And my name's Jay Carpenter. I'm the founder of Desert Blockchain. And please follow along and let us know if you have any questions. You can follow us on Twitter at Desert Block Hack, and you can also go to desertblockchain.com. So thank you very much for your time and attention, and follow along. Hello.
How you doing?
Good. I'm Jay.
Jay, I'm Adam Foster.
Hi, Adam.
CEO of Kiwi.
Yeah.
They gave me a heads up that you might
Cool.
check that out.
Yeah, well, we're just getting started.
Food right over there if you want.
All right, so before we get started, today is the 100th birthday of Claude Shannon.
Oh, excellent. That's an important name to know if you're doing anything with computers or even
How appropriate is that? So Claude Shannon is known as the father of information technology. Information theory. So, yeah, I didn't realize that when I scheduled this event, but it's most appropriate.
That's pretty awesome.
So,
There's some really important, if you understand information theory, there's some really important implications, not just for computing, but for life in general. So
Yeah.
anyone who hasn't looked into that, at least read the Wikipedia page on information theory.
yeah, for sure. So, anybody else have any comments about Claude Shannon's contribution? Other than happy birthday, I assume it's Dr. Shannon.
I wonder, do they teach about this in ASU? If you get a computer science degree, do they even mention him? Or
Geez, I would hope so, but my God.
not in my program? That is sad.
Yeah. So let's just go over the schedule for today, and we're not going to really follow the schedule, but this is designed so that we can talk a little bit this morning, and then the idea is to take on some projects, and I emailed out some projects last night using IPFS, and Elio is going to talk about Nebula, and hopefully we can hack on that. You know,
We can
small
write
group.
a front-end prototype today.
Yeah, front-end prototype, and maybe we can play around with hooking up Nebula and IPFS if you've got some ideas on that.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the schedule. Just go ahead and eat that up. So I'd like to just kind of go around and have people introduce themselves and let us know what you're interested in getting out of today. So, Mark, you want to start it off?
Sure. Good morning. Mark Goldstein, International Research Center. I was engineer and engineering manager for 18 years. Worked at MicroAge when they were a startup in the Valley in the 70s in R&D. Worked at Medtronic on medical devices, hardware and software for a dozen years. And then 24 years ago, went out on my own. So I do market research, business intelligence, strategic work with tech companies. And Steve Epstein, who's not in his seat, but you'll hear from, has come on board in my company to work on IoT and blockchain competencies in a practice area. So I'm still fairly advanced in IoT. I'd say I did my first IoT project in '78, intelligent house and office environment. But blockchain is much newer to me. Well, new in general, but newer to me. still coming up the learning curve on that.
Cool. All right. The other thing I'd like to say about Mark is I really welcome your participation, Mark, because I think you've got a wealth of the policy side of the picture that I'm really looking forward to having your input on the policy side as we move along. And we'll talk a little bit about policy a little bit later, but I think that's a key element for innovation in this space. And policy is basically missing in several of the, at least
And
first.
you have seen the Tech Council take on data center tax things and Uber and Lyft and other enablement in a market that's not natively friendly to those things. And more recently, they're working on drone unmanned aerial vehicles. So I do provide some bridge to the Tech Council and their interests in these areas.
Cool. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Bill Maher. I have a little company called Special Computing. I've been doing embedded stuff since, I don't know what, I guess 78, 76. So I worked on, all this avionics, for airplanes, basically every airplane known, from SR-71 on down.
Wow.
Uh,
Big leaky
yeah.
bird.
Yeah, and so my claim to fame was that I was the guy that got the open source version of the BIOS and also a ROMable version of DOS. I never worked for Microsoft. I was saying that they actually worked for me because I created pretty much, the embedded division. I asked for it to be formed. And so, then it went on to Windows CE and, all the different ways of doing evaluation and bring up and all that kind of stuff. So there's thousands of projects I've been involved in, and I guess I'm an IoT guy, right? Because that's what embedded used to be called. I don't know, do they even call it embedded anymore?
We're renaming everything.
Yeah, I
Sure, for
think
an
they call it
error, there was
IoT because
M to M and M to
Yeah.
M.
Yeah.
I don't call myself an IoT company yet because I still feel that, nobody seems to know what that means.
Yeah.
But I do know what embedded means.
It's all marketing. It's just
Yeah.
like cloud. It's hosted services, not cloud.
Yeah,
anyway.
so what I'm trying to do is basically use my expertise to build actual products in the near term using this, because the stuff that we're talking about actually solves a lot of problems with the internet. That seems like everybody's coming up with a different way of doing things. Trying to lock you in, which is the actual opposite of what we're trying to do with this.
Yeah.
So it's getting
Depends who
interesting.
you are. Some people want to lock in, but
Yeah, exactly.
Not everyone.
They want to tell you about security, and then you'll get it if you use their product. So, and oh, by the way, it goes to a central server. Yeah, right. Thank you. So anyway, that's what I'm trying to do.
So, Bill, are you familiar with what's going on with open source small board computing and Arduino with avionics?
Yeah, I'm one of the biggest distributors for BeagleBoard.
of which board?
BeagleBone. So have you heard of BeagleBone Black?
No.
That's a U.S. answer to Raspberry Pi.
Okay.
And so I did a lot of projects with that, but I'm sort of getting away from it because, TI pretty much is end of their career. There's no more roadmap.
So one of the resources that I use is called the VoIP user conference, and they did this session with Mark Spencer, who's one of the founders of Asterisk. And what he's working on right now is taking the same paradigm that happened with telecom, which was you had all these closed proprietary elements in telecom, and then all of a sudden VoIP came along and it just blew the lid off of telecommunications. Well, he's doing the same thing with avionics. So he's actually built a plane that's being run with small board computers and Arduinos and stuff like that. So I think part of what is available for us to experiment with and play with in the desert blockchain realm is, what could be done with
That's-
avionics.
That's terrifying. I'm just thinking of the what's the one, the X, I forget which X plane, which number it was, the one with the forward swept wings.
You talk about the drone that's the size of an F-16.
No, I'm talking about there's an old, this is decades ago when I was a kid, they did one of the X planes, they're experimenting,
Yeah,
and most
Northrop.
wings are swept back. And they did one, it's like the X-20, I have to look it up anyway, it has forward swept wings, which makes it very aerodynamically unstable, which is just like today's quadcopters. They're incredibly aerodynamically unstable, which also means incredibly maneuverable.
Right.
And they were smart enough back then that they said the only way to fly this, no human could ever fly this thing. The stick control, you're just not fast enough. You can't move your hand fast enough to keep this thing airborne. So they made it fly by wire, and not just fly by wire. They actually had these computers that would actually figure out how to move the flaps. So when you move the stick left, it figures out what action needs to happen to make the plane go left. But
And
they were
keep it in
smart,
balance, yeah.
and they had 3 computers that were set up in a redundant quorum fashion, because this was supposed to eventually be a combat aircraft, even though it never got developed into one. And so that's the thing with today, knowing the difference between rack mount, like pizza box servers, and industrial grade stuff that's going by the wayside now, and the commodity stuff, which just the corners on it suck. When you look at the voltage and temperature corners on consumer grade chips, they're much, much narrower than
Right.
military grade and then industrial stuff. And just the failure rates are much, much higher. They did that study on the RAM talking about that. We thought that all these, a bit will only flip if a cosmic ray hits a memory site. Turns out a ton of the bit flips have nothing to do with cosmic rays. Memory just plain has errors. Even the ECC stuff has a lot of errors, way more than we thought. And so when you see a program crash, it may not actually be the program was buggy. It may have been bit flipped in memory. And so this is what terrifies me is people today don't seem to have that same mind toward redundant systems. And so the fact that you put a plane under microcomputer control without developing a quorum system, it's fucking terrifying.
Well,
So-
I don't know. I just ask you to keep your mind open around
It's a
this
great
because-
idea if implemented properly. My concern
Yeah.
is,
I believe, the Northrop Grummons and Boeings, builds the Apache,
yeah,
do know that stuff and do that stuff. Whether you would think or hope in the commercial airplane world,
you would
It's
hope,
there,
but
too.
you look at the cars and you look at some of the planes and the network that streams the Netflix is
Right.
not even VLAN from the network that runs the avionics,
Right.
which is
Right.
a huge security problem.
Yeah.
So
there's-
cool idea, but
Well,
this goes back to last time.
Yeah,
cool
yeah.
versus good. So
Yeah, but, I mean, if you watch this session, which I would recommend to everybody,
yeah,
it's the VUC 557 with Mark Spitzer's Evolution. But one of the things he talks about is the advantage of having an open source platform running
Yeah.
your avionics
That's
versus
a
these
must.
closed proprietary platforms.
that's
Because, like, I think he quotes like 65% of the cost of an aircraft is in the software and the avionics.
Yes. Well, not just the cost, but my list of lethal software bugs. If you go closed source, you get to
Yeah.
add to my list.
Yeah. So anyway, I bring that up because you talk about your experience
Yeah,
with
as a,
avionics.
as the designer of the air data computer for the SR-71, that was triple modular redundant. Yeah, I agree. They need that.
Yeah.
Which is ironic because those things that you're talking about with the
Yeah.
stability control and everything is actually happening in town over by Boeing
Interesting.
because the LHX and those things are actually done over by Mesa. I don't know if you guys know that.
No.
Yeah, by the Falcon Field.
Well, and then Honeywell here locally is involved with a lot of the avionics.
Well, they're doing the control systems for the new generation heavy lift rockets at Honeywell here.
Yeah, but see, one thing you have to understand is that the industry, the aerospace industry, is extremely corrupt. It doesn't allow new entrants to come in. It
Yeah.
doesn't allow any new stuff that is like anything that, because they've consolidated all these companies, and the companies I worked at was all one of them that got consolidated. So what's going to happen now is that the reason everything costs so much with the aerospace is because they can get away with it. Anytime you have an industry that's highly regulated, right, that has very few customers, right, and
They're not unique.
Well,
I mean, medical's the same way.
Exactly, so
almost
every-
every large industry.
Everything you guys are talking about is part of, I would say, the fundamental paradigm shift that we're dealing with here.
yes,
So
Absolutely.
there's a big shift from centralized to decentralized, from central servers, central control to peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
And that's a key element. And you know, whatever's happened in the past has happened in the past. But now there's a whole bunch of things that are on the table
The only thing
that are ripe for disruption.
The only way I'd qualify your statement there is it started when computers were huge and expensive.
Mhm.
It started centralized. Then with the desktop, we saw it become decentralized.
Right.
We're still in the middle of re-centralization with the cloud,
With the
and
cloud,
hosted
sure.
services. And so on the horizon, we see a potentially decentralized future, potentially. But
Mhm.
there's a lot of business interest. It's very advantageous as a business to have all your customers' data on your machines, to be able to charge them as you please and rifle through it and do whatever you want, really. So there's going to be there's going to be very, very wealthy business interests that love it the way it is right now, that are going to fight any kind of decentralization.
Well,
So it's going to be
so
interesting to see who wins.
let's go ahead and table that for the moment. Adam, did you have something to
Well,
say?
I just want to quickly say with this guy, I know, guys as engineers, and I'm originally from the auto industry, we want to look at the end goal like it should be, but this is a really good start for just linking everything together to get something, a minimum viable product together. And I know from doing this firsthand
Sure.
with building a fuel cell vehicle, is you're not going to have everything, with dealing with electric vehicles and all powertrain. For torque security, you need redundant systems just for safety. And these kids with experimenting and learning this stuff, they're not going to get there just yet. They first have to get the fundamentals before they put it in. So just
Totally agree. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to minimize what they've done because that's very cool. But my concern as someone in software for 20 years is a lot of times that MVP gets pushed straight out to market with very little adjustment, especially in software. Oh, it's good, ship it. I'm like, no, that was the proof of concept. I thought we were going to rebuild this thing right, and now we're shipping this. So that's my concern. Is there's always a push, at least in software, to just send it to market and see what kind of money comes in.
Yeah, I still like Guy Kawasaki would say, ship early, ship often.
Yeah,
You know,
well, that was the big mantra at Amazon is, perfect is the enemy of good. And my counter to that was good enough is the enemy of working properly. So
I just want one last thing is that exactly for this reason, that's why I'm working on the Phoenix Drone User Group. So that the idea is to put out a prototype like this and then invite people out to say, okay, go try this all out. And have a way that then, like Phoenix, for instance, they want to be a drone-friendly city as opposed to all these other people. And there's going to be plenty of people in the industry who's going to try to shut it down.
Yeah.
They're going to continue saying, yeah, okay, here's a paper bag, it's dangerous. And there's going to be a lot of prejudice, basically, that says the drones are no good, and then we have to fight that. So all I'm saying is there's a lot of layers.
Yeah.
All I'm trying to do is say, well, I think what we got to focus on is one idea at a time. Can we get this part to work? We can't fix everything. And what I see is that a lot of these companies and projects that try to fix everything in the world just so they can monetize and say they can do everything. So I see a lot of these companies coming up, create an MVP, say, oh yeah, we're going to cure cancer, and they're going to do everything in order to get a better valuation.
Yeah.
But you can move ahead as a little company and do some small stuff and still get the traction. That's all I'm saying. What I wonder is whether this guy is the do everything crowd or not. I don't know. It's interesting to see.
There's an initiative underway, suffice it to say, it's focused on open source hardware and software applied to avionics. So
very cool.
I think it's really interesting.
I just hope they don't turn into another 3DR. That's all. It's just.
Well, anyway.
Introduction.
Introduction. Maximo.
Hi everybody, my name is Maximo Mena. I met Jay and Elio through the Phoenix Version Control meetup, which happens the second Wednesday of every month at Node Media, usually.
Thank you for starting that.
No problem. I have a degree in computer systems, but I know very little about blockchain. That's one of the reasons I'm here. I'm here to learn and help out where I can lend a hand.
Thanks.
Your degree's from ASU or?
Yeah, computer systems at ASU Polytechnic.
And the blockchain, by the way, is very much akin, if not a different version of Git and GitHub. So there's a lot of common ground there.
Yeah.
So,
Elio
Elio.
Gieco, I've done a number of things, about 20 years in the industry, all different from EDA software to websites, analytics, all kinds of junk, little interactive design, front-end stuff. Currently, I'm on Security Canyon with Jay, which is a state initiative to attract, develop, and retain cybersecurity talent. So I'm getting pulled more and more back into that world of cybersecurity, even though traditionally as I tell people, I've kept an eye on that. Even though I've been more of a systems architect, I like to try to make systems that are solid, that won't fall over at the slightest push. So yeah, my interest in this stuff is I do see I was really excited when we were talking about PCs, back in the 80s and 90s. And we're like, oh, look, you have all this local compute power. That was very exciting. And to me, it's been very tragic to see us oscillate back towards centralizing, because there's just a lot more failure modes. There's a lot of negative security implications with centralized systems. We've seen technologies like we'll be talking about today for at least the last 3 or 4 decades. None of these are new technologies. These have been around for a while. We were just having a discussion before the mic got turned on with Maxwell and I about what is it about technologies like Facebook. Facebook was not the first mover, the second or the third or the fourth. It was way down the line. A lot of people had already done social. Why did Facebook catch with all of its issues when none of the previous, some of them arguably better social platforms, didn't catch? So what is it about technology? So that's something maybe we could discuss a little today. What is it about a technology that causes it to catch and get a lot of mind share in the public? Because it's definitely not the quality of the technology. I can point to so many examples of superior technologies that are better by any technical metric that have just languished. And I think we were talking on the phone, was that about Plan 9? Was that you the other day? Again, Plan 9, amazing OS, a rewrite of Unix by the original team that did Unix to be a more Unixy Unix. And they pioneered some amazing stuff in there, and no one's heard of it. A handful of people know Plan 9 even exists. A handful of people on the planet know there's more than 3 or 4 OSs, when there's actually hundreds of them. So anyway, I'm here to continue the ongoing conversation of exploring the future of technology. There's some great ideas out there. How do we get people to actually apply these ideas and start moving forward again, rather than reinventing stuff that's been done? Because we seem to right now be reinventing it a little worse each time. So.
okay. Thank you, Elio.
My name is Adam Flaster. My background is I'm originally from the auto industry. I've done alternative energy vehicles from passenger car to Class 8 trucks. I'm originally from Michigan. I moved out here over 3 years ago, worked for a startup here in Chandler. I ended up starting my own company called Kiwi. It's called Kiwi, QIEWIE, and it's
Okay.
yeah, it's the main mission of the company is to map the ecological wealth of the world. So how you would come into the market and provide a free market solution for dealing with climate change, where we can map what's unique characteristics for each zip code in the United States or in the world. And the whole idea of this is it kind of fills this blind spot between both sides where you come to the argument where it's about property rights. And that's the main mission of the company, because we deal with all this. We're really good at visualizing large aggregate data. We also now do services for small and medium businesses where we can look at where their market, what their market looks like, where they should focus, who they should talk to, and some predictive analytics. And it was suggested to me to come here to check it out, but my colleague Quentin Baker, because there's this bigger picture that we're looking at and able to filter down, that there is probably something we can contribute to you guys in, whatever you guys are up to. It just, yeah.
Well, certainly property rights are part and parcel with the blockchain. And so I think, based upon what I know about, what you guys have been working on, I think there's a lot of common ground here.
Yeah.
And, we'll talk about blockchain. What does blockchain really mean in a minute or two?
Yeah, the main thing here is just kind of curious. I like hearing about what kind of technologies people are working on. Because my biggest thing with dealing with the auto industry was that this mainly came in a way of financing advanced technology, where like you had this boom and bust of oil prices and how you would monetize it. So mapping all these things and what makes them unique, we can look at what the price point is or opportunity is for technology that's not can be used in one space, or like what the total monetized value is for technology that hasn't been invented, and present that opportunity for somebody to take on going into that space.
Cool. Great. Welcome, Matt. Okay. Suresh?
Yeah. Sorry, I got in late. I went to SkySong and came back. Got confused.
No problem.
So, yeah, I work in financial industry for 15 years or so, and now I've done education technology for the last 7-8 years. I think there is a big possibility of innovation in how things are kind of aggregated and presented and owned, as he said. And I'm just here to kind of see what my experience fits into what is going on in the industry. And I have my own small startup, and we've been working on several things. And one of the big things that we started working on towards is the social media side of it, and predictive analytics also is another part of it. And we have last night we just deployed our first single sign-on environment with Shibboleth. So I think all these security aspects to it, and also just as a service side, how you take these things, have a team in India as well. So there's whatever we come up with, there's a possibility to make the society better for sure. I have my own mobile apps for education that I've released for free on both the environments. I have 15,000 downloads for the learning management system mobile app.
Oh, great.
But still I'm dabbling. I've been doing this for 3 years full time, and trying to find my place and how all this fits in.
Great. Cool.
Steve? Oh,
Steve, go ahead.
My name is Steve Epstein. I work with Mark at the International Research Center recently. My background is I started in cryptography in the Navy a long time ago. Then I was one of the first ISPs here in the early 90s.
Oh, wow.
I thought that Gopher was going to be the big thing, not the web.
I was just talking to someone about that.
So I date myself back to the days of 5 meg storage for ISPs per subscriber, where you would get a website with a tilde attached to it. And
Can't even load a web page in that anymore.
yeah, you can.
These are-
Then I went to US West and Quest, and I was the e-commerce and application service provider contact point for US West and Quest, and then did several different startups in the Bay Area from here in education software.
Okay.
And then the last 4 years I've been doing mobile health consulting, mostly for hospitals and doctors, getting off of pagers and having secure texting with basically with Twilio being the back end. Now that Twilio is really, really easy, it's put me out of that marketplace. So in the last 6 to 9 months, I've been following the Internet of Things, primarily from the industrial IoT. I think the consumer IoT is very fragmented, it has a lot of problems, security with Nest and
Right.
Philips Hue lighting, and
Yeah.
Samsung trying to do a refrigerator as a hub for the house. And, so my motivation being here is, and Mark can speak to it as well, which is that I think the industrial IoT and the blockchain are smashing together very quickly, and that's my motivation for being here this morning.
Cool.
How about you, Jay?
So I've been involved with telecommunications for over 20 years now. And I have been working for the last 15 years. The industry has been working on a way to bring telephone numbering into the contemporary. So basically, how do you transition from telephone numbers into something that looks more like an IP address? And how could you combine all of our disparate addresses? You know, we've got email addresses, telephone numbers, Skype handles, all Facebook accounts, all this stuff, and it's all doesn't work. You know, it all works independently.
Mhm.
So how can you bring all that together in a unified, harmonious fashion? That's my interest. And there's a whole bunch of other things that stem from that as well, like identity is a key part. And that's one of the core things that's on the table here around the blockchain is identity. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But in late 2014, I heard about what Ethereum was doing. And all of a sudden it was like, wow, now I can see what's really available here. So before that, you know, I'd heard about Bitcoin, and that was kind of a curiosity, but not of much interest. But when I heard about the blockchain, which is the foundation of Bitcoin, then it was like, oh, wow, this is huge. And so let me talk about that just a little bit, because, you know, here it's Saturday morning, April the 30th, 2016. We're in the middle of the 5th largest city in the United States. And we've got, you know, a community. I heard that we've got at least 60,000 engineers in the Valley, which I can believe that with all the, you know, major companies that are here.
Sure.
And yet we've got, what, 8 people? Okay. So either there's one of 3 things that has happened. Either I have done a horrible job of promoting this event, or the blockchain and what we're talking about today is inconsequential, or number 3 is we are very, very early here. And people really don't understand what's going on. So let me assume that I've done a decent job of promoting this event, which I think I have. Let's assume that the blockchain has some sort of merit to it. It's just we're at the very early stages. And let me talk about the third possibility, which is we are at the early part of this. Go ahead.
I would say just the name blockchain
Yeah, exactly.
is off.
Exactly.
Like it doesn't relate to what you need or what you are or who you are or how does it affect me. It has no context whatsoever. Blockchain looks like, oh my God, chain. Is it jail related or is it?
Yeah. It
Like-
could be worse. We could go with the official name with Merkle-DAG,
Yeah.
Merkle-directed acyclic graph, right?
Yeah. So I really think as a
Yeah.
public, just the PR aspect of it, it needs to have something like the concept that you said, unifying identity.
Yeah.
Even if you say identity, it just makes much more sense, or contextual identity, something to do with something more meaningful, how it relates to your life.
Look,
You mean
we met
Suresh,
you don't get excited about distributed ledgers and distributed architecture and network? Doesn't that just fire you up? What's
So
wrong with you?
we met at the IoT conference that had, what, 400 people at that?
Right.
Oh, at the Mesa
The Mesa Arts
yeah.
Center?
Arts Center.
Okay, and so I view the fields in the minds of extremely intelligent people, which all of us are. This thing that we talked about before it started about Slock.it and the people engineers who look down the path of Bitcoin and blockchain and distributed ledgers, and they've gone into GitHub or they've read about it, they come up empty-handed because they can't test something or write something and then test it. And just because they might own a Bitcoin, they might own $428 of it or something different.
Fractional.
Just for fun, not
just for fun and see if they can buy something with it. So there's a reason why there's 8 and not 80.
Right.
Okay.
Or 800.
Or 800. And so,
But
and I think
that's not a bad thing.
no, it's not a bad. No, it's not a bad
Because
thing.
I went-
thing,
but-
I went through the AI bubble.
But-
I'm sorry.
But I'm just saying that
Yeah.
the similarity with Jay and Mark and I have had this discussion for the 4th time now, which is that it smells like 1993 or 4 to many of us, which is when you describe TCP/IP and the internet back in 93, AOL was not on the internet per se because you could only send email inside AOL only. The same thing was true at CompuServe at the time. And Delphi was the first nationwide footprint ISP that offered nationwide FTP services. That was before Earthlink, that was before Mindspring, that was before Netcom. I don't know, Mark, who else had a, am I missing somebody? Maybe?
Yeah, but I'm just saying
There
that
was Prodigy.
Okay,
Prodigy.
Prodigy was after Delphi, okay? And there were very intelligent people who didn't know why they would want to use FTP. Then when Gopher was available, they saw this pyramid of information that they got lost in.
Yeah.
And that being lost in aspect was before web surfing with the Mosaic browser of going to all these resources. And back in 93 and 94, the internet, 98% of people who were surfing before porn came on was government shit. There was, Thomas,
Libraries, yeah.
because remember Thomas came up with the Library of Congress.
Well,
And
it used to be, yeah.
And so the greatest resource of what people were spending their time on, as with me as an ISP with Pentium 90 machines, all the log files showed people going into government stuff to just download files, text files.
Yeah.
Okay. And then when Gopher showed up, then people started downloading, PhD, dissertations and things, right? So that's what the smell of this blockchain is that the average really intelligent engineer is saying, what do I need a distributed ledger for? My boss and my boss's boss is not telling me to do anything with it yet.
Unless you're in fintech, in New York, London.
Yeah,
I
right.
mean,
So
there is a
So the
So
only
there
people
is an
who maybe
early-
should have been here and you didn't get to them with your marketing and reach would be the Amex guys or the USAA guys up in Northwest Valley that
Charles Schwab.
and Schwab guys. But
Yeah, but I
that's
don't
about
think
it.
you want those guys because,
We don't want those guys yet.
yeah, well, they're going to show up because,
They did show up.
as
I'm
soon as
just
they
saying
can
the audience,
monetize
they
you,
know
they
they
will.
The
will.
sniff test guys that I think in the Valley of Engineers that would be here is not JDA software and not GoDaddy guys and
Yeah, my question is this going to turn into another AI bubble?
Well,
where-
okay,
Yeah,
let's
that's all I'm saying. If
let me
answers your
address
question,
that. Let me address the AI bubble and some other aspects of this. Suresh, you're exactly right. When we talk about blockchain, that's kind of a meaningless term. And in fact, it's not even well defined. What is blockchain? So, and when I talk about blockchain, when I go to meetups, like, Phoenix JavaScript and whatever, and I stand up and I say, okay, Desert Blockchain, people, I think it's like, oh, well, this is an Angular thing. or this is a Node.js, or this is a React, or whatever, some sort of little component. They don't realize,
It's an architecture.
well, not only is it an architecture, this is like one of the most revolutionary things I have ever seen.
Yeah, it's like the AI
Right,
bubble.
to Steve's point about the cusp on the web,
Yeah.
going from Gopher to Mosaic.
So let me try this analogy out on you guys, and you can give me some feedback. Prior to the web, information technology and communication and all that stuff, I think was like walking. You know, we could get from point A to point B, and you'd walk. Or maybe you'd ride a horse or whatever. That was kind of an innovation. Then the web came along, and that to me was like, okay, now all of a sudden we have a bicycle, or we have a skateboard, or we have, you know, some sort of thing where we could put our own energy into it and we could get from point A to point B faster using this machine. This is like adding fuel to the machine. And that's what I think is escaping people. They don't realize that this is actually the combination of this, which is the fuel, and this. Hardware and software driven by money and community. So we are at the very cusp of the community, but it's those three things. And when I say money, a lot of people, I'm guessing that people think, well, money's always been involved with software. We paid for software, and we did this, and, you know, you could make money if you're Mark Zuckerberg or whatever, or Bill Gates. There's always been money associated with software. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something totally different, where the money is now an integral part of this, both the software and the hardware, primarily the software. This is now tightly bound with this. And in the blockchain realm, they don't work unless you got the money fueling the hardware and the software and driven by the community. Take out any one of those three things, you really don't have blockchain. You have, like this says, database, which is, that's different.
So you want a slightly different take on that?
Go ahead.
The front so everyone doesn't have to turn.
Awesome.
Um,
Feel free to use the board.
So I see things a little differently, and as I always tell people, I think we're at an interesting time.
What if you step over this one?
There you go. I understand. Projector. So we've had a few advancements in human communication. First, we invented language, then we invented writing, and then one of the big things after that was telecommunication, communication over a distance. And so that started with the circuit switch network. We figured, hey, you can take some wires and you can string them from here to here, and you can actually make that a really long distance, like across the country. And we can have an unbroken circuit, and we can tap Morse code. And later we figured out how to encode speech and send that over the circuit. So we had the telephone. And then some brilliant people came up at ARPA and said, wait a minute, is there a way? We have this military network where we have catastrophic node failures, like literally node gets blown off the face of the planet. It's not coming back ever. And we have this problem all the time. Can we make something more durable? Can we make a communication system that even if we lose a node, it doesn't really matter. All the other nodes can continue to talk. Because the problem with circuit switch, you have to have an unbroken circuit, and you have to establish for a given communication, you establish a circuit. When I call someone, it's setting up that unbroken circuit, and then that circuit has to be maintained for the duration of the communication. And that capacity, that one circuit is taken the entire time, no matter what is sent or not sent, even if it's dead air, that circuit is maintained and then eventually torn down. And if part of the circuit drops out, I lose that communication. I have to start over and reestablish a new circuit. So there's a lot of disadvantages. Yeah.
And let me make a comment here, because this ties into what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about the avionics, is
that fundamental architecture of line, switch, etc., brings forth exactly what we were talking about, these closed proprietary, this cannot fail, give me 20 backups, give me,
Yeah.
5 nines of
I can tie into
reliability.
that with our infrastructure too, because that's been a trend.
Yeah.
But
So
we'll
that's-
save that for a sec. So we've had that, and we're very used to that. In fact, a lot of companies have built empires. A lot of the telecoms, they're very, very used to that. So ARPA was tasked with building the next generation of communication. How could we make a system that's not a problem, where you can have these node failures and shake it off as a minor annoyance rather than a full-on catastrophic failure? And they invented ARPANET, which later became, went under DARPA and then became the internet that we use today. And that's packet switch networking. So instead of a circuit, we chop it up into little packets. And in theory, these packets can take multiple paths. In reality, they often don't, because when you look at the actual topology of how this all has been deployed, it still looks like a circuit switch network, which is why you'll still have the incident. I think, forgive me, because a few of you I know have heard this before, but there have been incidents recently in Arizona where a malicious guy with a shovel chopped a fiber line, and Flagstaff, I don't think they lost connectivity, but it was severely
Oh, no, they
degraded.
did.
Was it full on
ATMs were
loss?
down.
I thought they had one other link, and it was just heavily degraded.
Oh, it was
Well,
gone, yeah.
Only for people that buy multi-home circuits.
Yeah.
The problem is most people didn't. They were carried over CenturyLink.
Yeah.
And so, no, actually, I advised on a GAO study on
Okay, so they
recently.
totally lost.
So they're not
connectivity.
connected to Kingman or Vegas from up there? At
No.
all?
Okay.
Well,
Interesting.
again, AT&T goes through I-40 east-west.
Yeah.
But you have to buy multi-home capability.
All right, all right.
If you only buy tier 1, or
Yeah.
2 circuit from CenturyLink, if you multi-home, you're not in bad shape. But if you buy a single circuit, you're fucked.
Yeah. Which is how most of society operates. So extrapolate out from that. So we have this, in theory, this capability of having more resilient connections. In reality, we just basically get a little bit easier multiplexing and QoS, quality of service monitoring. So that's been the first 2 revolutions in telecommunication. And I think we've been for quite a while now, for at least the last 30 or 40 years, on the verge of the 3rd major revolution. And that ties into this kind of stuff. And I always say blockchain, in the same way that a square is a constrained rectangle, blockchain is a constrained version of a broader data type called a Merkle DAG. And it was invented by Ralph Merkle. I'm trying to remember when that was. If it was 70s, 80s.
I think it was the 70s.
I believe so. Anyway,
I'll bring it up.
and DAG stands for Directed Acyclic Graph. So you can make a chain, that can be a form of DAG, but it doesn't have to be a chain. And this is where the two differ. A chain is basically a Merkle DAG that tries to enforce a single path and
Okay.
tries to do whatever it can to minimize, prevent, or throw away with some predictability. Anytime a branch or a fork occurs, it tries to say, no, there can only be one of these. We're trying to achieve global consensus. But there's a broader application for this technology. In fact, the Merkle DAG, or Merkle tree as it was first called, which is one, again, a subset of a DAG, was invented to diff huge amounts of data. Said if we have these, and at the time, huge amounts was megabytes, I think.
Right.
Megabytes are, hundreds of. But back then, and even today, if you have, several multi-terabyte disks, diffing the entire disk is extremely expensive.
Yes.
So what you can do is you can take every file, you can run a cryptographic checksumming algorithm on that file. So we start at the bottom with, we have little files down here, and we checksum all of these. And then those files can now be grouped into directories, and every file below it, we include the checksum. And then we can work all the way up to the top here. And because the cryptographic checksums are included, everything below is included in the one above. If anything down here changes, that invalidates this checksum, which invalidates this checksum all the way to the top. So it's very, very efficient to diff entire structures of data, because we can just look at the top and do a very small string comparison, which is pretty easy and efficient. And if they match, we're good. And if they don't match, then we can start doing a, not depth first, a breadth first traversal to find out where they differ and where they don't, and identify which pieces of data. And we can carry that all the way down. If we use a smart file system like Butter or ZFS, we can carry that all the way down to the individual block level below the file to make a very, very efficient way of comparing data structures. And this is how your group there, Git, this is how it works internally. It stores, there's 3 key types of objects. They're all basically plain text files, or can be binary, and anyway, I'm not going to go into the internals. We'll save that for a Git Phoenix version withdrawal talk. Do you have a question?
I'm just saying, it's still a 50.1% powerful network, right?
In terms, well,
You're
so,
talking about a,
so this
with
with the,
security around
Yeah, the
it?
security of that is still 50.1% there.
well,
That's a different
no.
thing.
So,
Because I'm saying the chain,
so
by
that,
being linear, they've always expressed it as 50.1%.
Binary, right?
yes,
So I'm not a math genius
So
to know if that's still 51.
there's
That's
50.1.
different,
Yeah.
because you're talking about consensus, and he's talking about a direct Merkle DAG, which is a linear, cryptographically secured chain, basically. So
well, again, not necessarily a chain. It could be a
Well,
tree.
right.
It could be, and it doesn't even have to be a tree. We don't have to have one top node. We can have other nodes coming in. It's a directed acyclic graph. So that means there's no cycles, and these properties arise because when you checksum this, you can't include a pointer to this item because you can't create this item until you know the checksum for this item.
Right.
And so this has to be done in checksum before you can create this item, which points down. And so this is why it has to be directed, is because everything has to wait till everything below it has been done and checksummed before that can be included in the list here, which is then checksummed, which can be included in the list here all the way up. So it's a consequence of that property of cryptographic checksums. We have to wait until we know what the bottom one is until we can create the next level. But a Merkle DAG, and I should erase blockchain right now because this is not what we're talking about. It's, again, 2 separate things.
Why don't you put Merkle DAG up there? And by the way, the patent on this was published in 1982, according to Wikipedia, I believe.
So,
And by the way, Ralph didn't know how to spell his name.
oh,
R-A-L-F, Merkle.
really? Yeah, interesting. So anyway, so to get to your point, there are two different things going on here. With the Merkle DAG, we can use this structure to do multiple things. We can use it for very efficient data comparison. We can use it for versioning of data. We can use it for, if we constrain it, we can use it for consensus.
Okay.
And so that's how a blockchain works. Is a blockchain is the same type of structure, but a blockchain, instead of having a directory tree, we have a Genesis block where we started. And then every time we want to record some transactions, we write those into a new block that then, again, points to the checksum of the previous block. And again, we do not want branches here because the whole idea is that it's a distributed ledger. We can distribute this because everything's cryptographically verified. Throwing objects around, we can throw them around wherever, and we can rerun the cryptographic checksumming algorithm, and we can know whether we have trustworthy data or not. And so now the integrity of the data, the trustworthiness, is not tied to some person owning that machine, as most of the web. It's tied to do the cryptographic primitives, do the passwords, public key with using public, symmetric, asymmetric, etc. Do those values, when I rerun the math and double check it on my end, do those check out? Does the person, well, I don't want to get into the whole, unless there's demand for it, I don't really want to get into asymmetric crypto right now. But anyway, we'll defer that because that's a long conversation in itself. But this allows you to see that if I say I own this really, really big imaginary number, well, not imaginary, but a really big number, really huge number, it would take pages and pages to print out. I own this number, I want to give it to you. This allows us to record that transaction and sign that with our cryptographic keys. And then in the future, everything points back to that. And that can't be changed because, again, this needs to have that value. If you try to change this retroactively,
then that value would bubble up and create a whole nother branch. That would be a divergent branch. And that's, again, that's what we're trying to minimize. So that would allow fraud if you could do that. And so Bitcoin has ways of, basically the longest chain has a few other techniques to make sure that you can't do things like that. So anyway, distributed consensus is an interesting application. I've been looking at this technology and saying, wait a minute, ever since I started really playing with Git, there are some even more interesting implications for going beyond what we do now. Is this circuit switched model of I need to, go to this server and I need to look up the DNS, then I can talk to the server, then I can do an SSL handshake. And there's this whole chain of assumptions we make when connecting to a website that we're actually getting the data we intend to get. And a lot of those, there's already been multiple compromises of root certificates from different CAs. There's just the CA model itself has been broken.
CAs meaning certificate authorities.
Yeah, thank you. So, and you gave an excellent talk about that at ISSA last year. So that's a broken model that was broken before it was ever deployed. And so we want something better. We want something that gives us that cryptographic assurance that the blockchain does, that when I ask for data, I want to be able to get this data. And I don't want to have to go to one server. I don't want that fragile single source like we have now. I want to say, here's the data I want. So the analogy is, right now our entire internet works something like, all right, I left some data. I left a book for you at a locker in Terminal 4 at Sky Harbor. So go there. Here's the key. Just open the locker. That book, whatever I left there is for you. You don't know what I left there, and you have no way of double checking when you go there that it's actually the thing that I left or that I even left it versus someone else. Might have tucked something in there or might have taken it first. So moving to a system like IPFS or anything else based on a Merkle-Dag model is a much more trustworthy system. It's more like having a book. There's no books. Oh, here we go. It's saying, this is a really good book. I have no idea if it is. Blender Guide looks pretty good. Anyway, saying this is a really good book. You should grab a copy of this. So here's the ISBN. I'm not going to give you my copy, but here's the ISBN. You can now go to any store, any library, anywhere that you can buy a book. And based on this identifying number, you can get your copy of this book. And there can be more and more copies. We can print as many as we need. And it's great now because there's not one single source. If you go to one bookstore and it's closed, then you go to the library, they're still open, and you can go get the book from there. So a lot of these issues we have right now with having to deal with scaling, having to deal with load balancing, having to deal with resiliency and all this stuff, those go away with a distributed system. You end up with a very resilient, robust system that allows us to store and share the world's data. And going back to a point that I think you were making, the original dream of the internet, the whole hyperlink thing, was that we would have, instead of, I don't think anyone probably remembers, some people here do, but so none of today's kids know what a card catalog was, flipping through. I'm actually old enough to remember having to flip through the card catalog and then go find the book. And that was a pain. So the internet was designed to address that. HTTP, whole idea of a hyperlink was, instead of flipping through there, you have the footnotes and you can say, oh, click and jump directly to where that other source of information is. And that's not a bad idea. The problem is we are rapidly moving away from that with what's being called the feudal internet, where everyone wants, I think you were mentioning it earlier, everyone wants their little chunk. And the value of Facebook, the value of Google, the value of all these feudal ecosystems are based on how many people are stuck within. You were mentioning, was it AOL? You could only send email to other users. Same thing with Facebook. You can only send Facebook messages to other Facebook users. These systems don't interoperate. They can't even be federated. So everyone's trying to pull everyone in and wall them back in and recreate AOL, recreate CompuServe. And it was amazing to watch us say, well, this is a fun little toy, AOL CompuServe Prodigy, but it'd be great if everyone could talk to everyone. And we learned that lesson. And then we very quickly now, within the last 10, 20 years, have undid that lesson and said, well, wait a minute, it'd be great if we could force only a small subset of people to be able to talk to each other. So we're basically unwriting the internet right now. And I see that as a very disturbing trend. And we have this wonderful opportunity. I don't know if we'll take it, because again, we're only about halfway between the first circuit switched revolution and the second packet switched revolution. And where we really want to be is the third revolution, which is named data or content addressable data, where we ask for a copy by the name of that data, not by where the data happens to be sitting. So, and we'll see if we go there or not, because everything else corporate-wise is trending in the opposite direction. But that's what I'm here to explore.
But
those
again, we're
ideas.
human beings. The question is, if it's named data.
Yeah.
And named data is in the millions of repositories, then you either need to search it or it needs to be curated in a directory the way Yahoo looked like in 1996.
Yeah.
Which was
Hierarchical.
hierarchical.
I disagree. I agree and disagree.
So, because, back then in 96 through, or 95 through 99, I don't know, Mark, how many, remember you and I both had bookmarks of like 25,000 bookmarks. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was trying to,
Or 10,000.
10,000, whatever it was. It was in the thousands because I wanted to be able to find my shit again.
Yeah.
Okay. It wasn't until like 2007 or 8 that I've become addicted to Evernote, which is where I throw my shit now.
Yeah.
Okay. So I agree with you about whether we're going to take advantage of that, but it's still a matter of.
Do you remember Web 3.0? So this again. So Web 3.0, because 2.0 was basically like making stuff shinier. It wasn't very significant, but there was a thing that used to be really big about a decade ago called the semantic web.
Right.
Yeah.
That was, they were calling it Web 3.0, and the idea was that instead of what Google does, which is just keywords, and I type in some keywords,
Right.
and I throw away the ones that don't mean anything, like the and is, and then I take the rest of them and I do a statistical analysis based on how close the words on the page are and how many words and all this kind of junk. And it's good enough-ish where you get millions of results back, millions and millions. The vast majority of those are just worthless. They're either junk, they don't apply at all, and hopefully the first page has some stuff you halfway care about. But right now we have a really poor discovery system. And so this goes back to the days, remember Alta Vista, the directories versus the search engine. That was a huge thing. In the early days, you said, well, if I go to the directory, all that data is curated, so it's all going to be really high quality. So if I look up something, and if they have an entry, then I'll get just like 20 results, 10, 20 results, but all of them are going to be really, really good. I won't have to waste any time, but if they don't have an entry, or if they haven't indexed the site that has the best information, then I won't get access to that. So the alternative was a search engine where you would type in like Google and you type in some words and you get millions of results. Most of them are useless. So you end up wading through all this useless junk and spending a lot of time just pruning their result list, trying to dig through and find something that has value. And the search engines won because the web grew so fast that they said there's no way, no one company can curate the web. Now, if you remove that limitation, if we say, wait a minute, what if we had a structure where anyone, instead of a topology or a taxonomy rather, we would actually prefer something more flexible like an ontology. And if we had a way of annotating, every user had a way of annotating data, like a hashtag but more powerful. And this, I'm building on the research that PowerSet did before they got bought and thrown away by Microsoft because their tech is apparently gone. Haven't been able to find it anywhere.
Like Wikipedia.
No, so more like
Wikipedia gives you history. and
more
all
like
that stuff.
Freebase. So Freebase is a free. I don't know if that's still up either. Yes.
It is, but if you're doing search engine optimization for Google or Bing, and you include RDF from schema.org,
Yeah.
which is based on a German academic good relations software. It's a information that Google and Bing pick up on, give priority to, and it is essentially what appears in the right-hand pane of, for example, in Wikipedia, the right-hand pane is the RDF information from the article. That's the ontology.
Okay.
So it's not totally dead, it's just mostly dead.
Well, it became
So.
infrastructure. And so it's kind of, up until recently, it was sort of in the same class as artificial intelligence. You know,
Yeah.
it's the thing that lets you do OCR, but, you know,
Yeah.
nobody was doing, you know, until, you know.
Yeah.
While you're talking, would you mind introducing yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry, my
Thanks
name's
for-
Ed Nicholson. I consult.
Good to see you again.
So-
Ed drove down from Tuscaloosa. Thank you.
And I'd like to thank you very much for the coffee and the bagels.
Did you have a question, by the way?
Well, maybe I'm jumping ahead. I'm trying to understand more of the application of blockchain from just like what I've researched online. Like my understanding with doing this whole like thing where my research of what you guys are, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost like a way of
We'll correct you if you're right.
Yeah. Okay, so Joe, what
Word
you're
of the day.
doing by connecting money to hardware and software is you're looking at a way of decreasing the cost for speculation. So,
Of speculation,
of speculation in the market. So what-
transactions.
Well, think about how I understood it from like looking up you guys is that a lot of times with like Wall Street, they're betting on what's going to happen, and using this kind of system, you're filtering through the internet of events to best predict trends, where from subject matter experts or just general history of what happens when somebody usually does this kind of event. Is that kind of an accurate application?
So let's step back and clarify for
Well,
a second.
that's,
Jay and I have related but different goals. So Jay's stuff explores consensus and naming and discovery, and the stuff I'm looking at is I'm going back to H.G. Wells' 1910 idea of the world brain. I see this huge opportunity with computers to take the world's knowledge, make it instantly accessible to anyone, and preserve it for eternity if we want to.
Okay.
And right now, our technologies are doing a very, very poor job of that. If you look at the numbers on Linkrot from Internet Archive, I think within, I forget what the time frame was, it's less than a decade, 90% of the links go bad. And they don't go anywhere, and you can't get that data anymore. Maybe if they've archived it, but otherwise it's pretty much gone. So my concern is not monetary. I am looking at how do we safeguard the world's information. Right now, we're pushing all this information out of our brains into computers, and our computers have a severe case of amnesia. They forget everything really quick. And so when you look at libraries, they've made this massive transition from microfilm, which is actually really, really shelf stable. It lasts a really long time. And they moved a lot of that because everyone said, oh, DVDs it's digital, it's better. It's digital, but a lot of the DVDs that are sold to consumers are comprised of an organic dye layer, which goes bad. It rots like anything else. So all these libraries move these massive collections of knowledge onto these DVDs that are now literally rotting, and they're scrambling to transcode them on something more stable, because a lot of the microfilm got chucked. They're like, oh, we don't need this anymore. We got a scan of it. It's good forever. So we're going to have massive gaps in our collective world knowledge because we've embraced this technology, and like we were talking about before, it has been pushed out there half-baked. People have said, oh, it's good enough. Fail early, fail often. And we do, both of those. And so I'm looking at how do we have systems that are really, like in theory, just digital systems should give us a level of information assurance and accessibility far beyond paper. In theory. In reality, they're way below paper.
But a countervailing trend are massive digitization projects that bring online documents that we're never on microfilm. We're only on hard copy. We're only in limited distribution. So there is, in the capture of human knowledge, there is a countervailing trend that digitalization drives, though archival concerns are still an issue with that.
So there's storage and reliability, and then as you're talking about, there's discoverability. So just because you can find this information, the bigger the pile you have, the more important it is to have tools that'll let you dig through that. And so let me finish 2 more minutes, and then I'm going to hand it back to you.
So
Counterpoint.
the problem with indexes like search engines versus directories is that, again, you can't have a large enough corporation, you can't make the financial model work to have one company curating the entire internet.
No, but there are
It can't happen.
crowdsource opportunities.
How exactly? However, if you were to build a system that anyone can potentially curate that knowledge,
Right.
Wikipedia is a great example of, if we let the world curate the encyclopedia, it scales really well. There's stuff in Wikipedia, for all the flack they get. I remember going to Britannica when I was a kid and looking up, and a lot of the topics, just there's nothing in there. I'm like, but it's supposed to all be in the encyclopedia. Why is so much missing? And now it's amazing. You go to Wikipedia, not all the articles are perfect, and there are some issues there. However, it covers almost anything is in there. And so again, expanding that idea out beyond Wikipedia, taking knowledge that is in Wikipedia, and right now it's all stuck in one set of servers. And if people stop donating, the largest collection of human knowledge ever assembled in one place could just wink out of existence. And to me, that's totally unacceptable. So yes.
Wikipedia also captures semantic information, but it only does it in a very primitive way. They've been very careful not to project structure onto their information, and consequently, the semantic information that they do capture is very primitive in context. So if you work with it, you have to understand that and combine it with other available tools in order to make it useful.
Yeah. Will you guys define semantic web and semantic information?
So semantics are the meaning behind the words. So syntax is all the little rules and stuff. And semantics are what do you actually mean? So when we talk about semantic programming, semantic variable naming and stuff, we're saying don't name the variable I. What the hell does I mean? I doesn't mean anything. Name the variable counter, or name the variable number of participants. Name it something that actually has meaning in the program. And in the same way, bringing meaning to the data. So when you search for something, a great example, there was a site, they're now, I think they're kind of still around, called EVI, EVI. And in fact, if you want to see if you can pull them up, sure. Look up EVI. I don't remember if it's .com or whatever, but it was originally called True Knowledge. It was the same time PowerSet. They got in just a little after PowerSet and Twine and all this, back at the height of the hype, for the semantic web and having computers actually give us meaningful results and direct answers. And whoops, go to the second one. Let's try it. Let's see what happens. Yeah, that's it. I don't know. I think it's not as good as it used to be because they don't expose some of the other stuff. But I had a question I asked at one time right after George Carlin passed away, and is George Carlin alive? And so let's see what it says today. Is George Carlin alive? See if it still has the same powers it used to. But in the old days, when it was True Knowledge, it was really interesting because it would just tell you yes or no. It wouldn't give you 5 million results, most of which, again, are just useless to you. It'd be like, no, he died. And you could actually ask it in the past. Let's see. So they've cleaned it up a little bit, and that's nice, and that's definitely useful. So they're giving you all the relevant information. So this is definitely superior to a Google search. You're asking the question, you're getting all the relevant information back in one single thing, rather than millions of irrelevant pieces of junk. And in the past, they had a debug interface somewhere around here where you could click and you could say, okay, but why do you think that? Tell me why you think that's the case. And it would show you the entire reasoning chain and all the facts. And so it would say, well, we've interpreted your question to mean, you're asking about a person by the name of George Carlin, and you're asking them if they're in the state of being alive. So based on that, we found this article that said that his, date of death, he was deceased as of this date. That date is prior to today, therefore he is no longer in the state of being alive. And it was really fascinating because you could type in all these really complicated questions and it would do natural language processing. It would parse out the question and it would actually understand the question. And then it would give you a direct answer.
Another source of information is the W3C They do a lot of standards development.
Right.
So if you want the ontology for metrics used in the space industry, there's an ontology, NASA contributes to it, it's global, and it's very sophisticated. The typical languages that you'll look at are called RDF, Resource Description Framework, OWL, which is
ontological web language or something?
yeah,
Dublin Core.
yeah, Dublin Core will tell you
Yeah.
about the title
Yeah.
of an article and thing, but it can get
Then
very
there's-
specific.
What was Sparkle? Do you remember that one?
Sparkle is
SCRQL.
is a SQL-like query language.
Okay.
But there,
So-
the structure, basically, there's an upper ontology. Well, there's not an upper. There are several attempts at upper ontologies which unify all knowledge. Then there are middle ontologies like the one from NASA that addresses a specific area. Then there are lower or simple ontologies like folks, friend of a friend, that identify your person, that are very small, very focused. And these all are done in RDF. Consequently, they can all work with each other so you can build what you need. And it can get very, very complicated. But if you're managing any kind of knowledge, this is the structure that keeps you from going insane. Now, well, yeah.
Too late.
Yeah.
But essentially, if you have a website and you want a search engine to pick up additional information about your website, you include that in the HTML, you include RDF, Google sees that, consumes it, promotes you above others who do not communicate as well, and then it provides links. Furthermore, if you have products on your website that you're vending from third parties, they can give you semantic web information that allows you to display the product, its description, characteristics, all the basic information, and that seamlessly comes from their manufacturing. They manufacture both the information about the product and the product. You can consume both. You sell a product, and the information that you present to your customers basically is semantic information brought forward from.
Yeah.
And
that's great
So-
for today's framework, but I'd like to see us go beyond that because right now we're at the mercy of the search engines.
Yeah, and
which
it's,
for most
it's very
people is
fragile.
Google.
It'll go away.
And if you looked at, there's some great papers that came out earlier this year. If Google wanted to sway this election, they could totally do it. They have the power and the capability to get whoever they want elected. They can.
If Google wanted to sway this election, they'd be called Twitter.
Can we type what is blockchain there?
let's see what it comes up with. Yes.
So what I hear here is it's just like a nodal version of like the Library of Alexandria. Is that kind of correct?
Much more than that, because
Yeah,
once you
it's
start
just
tying
videos.
multiple nodes together, you can now use a blend of human and artificial intelligence to make more than a static data store, and actually literally have the concept of a global brain, have a worldwide understanding.
Well, that's
So that's getting a little lofty, but you
well,
could
no,
do it.
because then you have in all this you have that ocean of data,
Mhm.
and you built it to it. You built your information of what's viable, what for core everything. Okay, that's fact. Okay, the next out where you get past that, where you're going next is greatest understanding of what does that actually mean. How is that useful? How do I act on it? How do I practice that? How is it useful? So it's kind of like this thing right now. We're talking about all this information on like what is the relevance of a college education, because you'll go there, you'll dump all this money in textbooks, classes, but there's stuff is online for free. So what's the value of that? I'm not trying to make it about money, but like this is a thing. Like
You know all the
21st century,
functionality that
like, how
Facebook
do you-
does? You know all the functionality that Facebook has connecting people?
Yeah, but
That's
people,
all semantics.
yeah, people don't know how marketing companies spend millions of dollars trying to make sense of that. And they can be maybe
But it's all based
one
on,
or 2 points correct, like
But-
percentage wise.
but it's all based on a large semantic web that Facebook creates from all the information that you provided. That's the critical creation of value, and it's being used in a semantic web tool. So when you advertise through Google or you approach people through Facebook, your selection is determined by a semantic web of information that those companies maintain. You don't see it, it just shows up and you get billed for it, but that's what you're using.
So thank you, Ed. Adam, does that answer your questions?
Yes.
Okay, let me.
All right, I'm gonna give it back to you now.
No,
Go back to blockchain
Thank
stuff.
you, Elio. So your question, though, Adam, was, isn't the blockchain some sort of adding some sort of efficiency to monetary transactions
Well,
and
Well,
predictions?
he said speculation though.
Well, no,
Speculation.
decreasing costs involving speculation. So my understanding, like, and this is one of the reasons why I came here today, is understanding more of what you guys are looking to do with this. Like, what my understanding is, like, it's almost like a pulling together of subject matter experts to, like, say, okay, this is really what's going to happen here. You know, like for black swan events, like the guys who were pointing out all these trends that were leading up to suboptimal trends. Like that was the context of how I was introduced to this. So
Mhm.
is that kind of inaccurate, or is it just am I just guessing incorrectly?
No, I think that's one dimension of what is on the table today.
Okay.
And I think part of, Suresh, what you said was blockchain is a term that really doesn't capture what this is, and that's correct. Because what you're talking about is one dimension of a very multi-dimensioned, phenomenon here, which is we're calling it blockchain, but it's many, many dimensions. And Elio's talking about it, and Ed's talking about it in terms of this semantic combination of, for lack of a better term, artificial intelligence combined with human intelligence and human interactions and all that stuff. This is a very multi-dimension thing. And certainly there are dimensions of efficiency around reducing transaction costs. There are dimensions of pooling together of knowledge, which is called prediction markets. And, all that stuff is emerging right now. Does that answer your question a little bit better?
Yes. No, that's exactly like. I'll give you an example. It may seem nebulous at first, but okay, so one big headline today was that the green zone in the Iraqi parliament was, basically, raided by, pissed off Iraqis. And, you correlate that back to Arab Spring, social and political inequality. You go back to oil prices, the Arab Spring with not having enough food. You go all through these, and like what I asked you about filtering through and doing your checksums, and like even comparing to events and how I understand this. I mean, you compare that to like what's going on in Syria or Yemen. You go back to see similar things like with Afghanistan when the Soviets went in. You even go back to the beginning of the 20th century before World War I, where you had these same kind of situations, but the people at the top are all commingled. You can picture together at Oxford, and it took one event, assassination, that had everything just fall apart. So that's how I understand it as multidimensional, with connecting these things through that blockchain.
Go ahead, Ed.
Two things. I was just talking about semantic web, and I see blockchain as a technical thing that's different. But also, if you're going to talk about World War I and the assassination of Ferdinand, was it?
Yeah.
Archduke
Ferdinand.
Francis Ferdinand.
You're only looking at the one signature event. You're not looking at the event of all of the creation of all the intertangling alliances that set this up. So if you had a semantic tool that would identify the chain of alliances, you could identify that if one domino fell, these others would fall. And that thinking and its relevance.
That's what I kind of concur without trying to, spit out 50 years of history leading up to that.
What I'm saying is that it's popular to point at one event and say, oh this assassination did that. The guy in, the Moroccan
Tunisia.
The Tunisian guy.
The Tunisian street vendor who set himself
vendor.
on fire because of he couldn't earn a living for himself.
Yeah.
That supposedly sparked the Arab Spring.
If you look at that as just one event, it's impressive, like to say, how could that possibly create the Arab Spring? But there's so much more that had structurally happened prior to that all you were looking for was something to move it.
I want to make it very clear. I'm not saying like looking at, like people look in the media saying, okay, that is the one event that triggered all of it. No, it's not. Like you're looking and correlating through all these different dimensions. What's the things that were leading up where all of a sudden the tipping point was where people paid attention was, hey, this guy set himself on fire. Like, hey, all of a sudden people are rioting because they don't have food.
Yeah. But if you're in the news business and it's the Walter Cronkite era, the only thing you get is that guy who set himself on fire starts the Arab Spring. But you can set it up so that you can get the longer story. So you can say, oh, okay, Ferdinand got killed in Sarajevo, but because of the way the French and the English and the Russians had their alliances set up, they were almost destined that any event that triggered it would put them against each other. So you can look at that and say, and then perhaps in advance say, these structures of alliances, you could do that right now with Trump and look at, what structure of alliances in the Republican Party is creating a reinvention of the bull moose wing of the party. It's been decades. They've been dormant. And that's what Trump is. He and Teddy Roosevelt are the closest analog in Republican politics. But
I want to put it on that same thing, but I understand what you're saying.
But you're getting the possibility is in a half second. Walter Cronkite, here's a story. Look what happened on the opposite side of the world. To an in-depth understanding that is probably more analogous to a Wikipedia article with links.
Correct.
So
It's a qualitative.
let's put it on pause for just a moment, because I want to make sure that today is valuable to everybody here, and I want to make sure that everybody's time here is really valuable, and I really, really appreciate everybody being part of this conversation. And I just want to make sure that we're headed in a direction that's adding value. So would you like to, and Eileen's going out to get some pizzas, so she should be back in about 30 minutes or so, but just kind of talk about how the day is going to go.
Sure.
We could do whatever we want to do here today. And I'd like to make sure that we optimize the value. I really see everybody's participated in these events as sort of like the core community in Phoenix that's at least interested in this, and it's a community that we can build upon. So we can continue the conversation. We can look up information. There are a couple of Raspberry Pis back here that are loaded with IPFS. I sent out a list of projects that are in GitHub, basically, that we could hack on. Elio's got Nebula that we could hack on after lunch or whatever. Would that be valuable? What would you guys, what would you like to do? What would be?
So
you want to look at some code?
Yeah. So I think there are two ways to peel the onion, right? One is there is a ideal situation in terms of all the great things that we want to do, and then there is a practical approach to the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if we don't attack the practical aspect of it and we go on the ubiquitous, something utopian kind of thing, if we start looking at it, you get nowhere, and the numbers that you want to see, people actually participating, you can never increase that.
Right.
So what is that? Even if it is not a full blown thing, we are going to change the way the library world works and the ocean of information out there, how we are going to kind of attack it and make it more semantically more meaningful. Those are all great big ideas,
they're big ideas, but they have small implementations.
Right.
So
So between this context of those things, even if it is, I mean, that's great. If it is a small implementation, what is the practical nature of that? If we take something like that, can we take it to an organization here in Arizona IT or in Arizona IT?
So here's what I've been, just my personal pain points. I've been doing a lot of coordinating and communicating with people. And so I have thousands of messages in my inbox. And I hate email. I really hate email because email, you get this one little discrete message.
You don't hate my emails.
The problem is there's so many others. No, you
Present
just,
company executive.
this one discrete email, this message that, and I can pull up the charts actually if you guys want to see them. But because I have a whole talk coming up that's I got graphics for and everything. They're not pretty yet, but anyway, an email it's the first clue on your digital scavenger hunt. So when you get that email and you have links to task information in Asana and calendar information in Google Calendar and mapping information where the event's going to be in Google Maps or OpenStreetMap, there's all these little bits of data. Maybe there's documents in Dropbox. All those things are just pointed to. And so if you open your computer and you see the email and then you close it and then you get on a plane, you have the clue. You can't do any prep work for what's coming up for the upcoming event because all that information is you have to have internet access. So what I want to do is fundamentally flip that and say, let's use what Git gives us as a basis for starting, and whether we build it on Git or IPFS or allow multiple backends, doesn't really matter. It could be done multiple ways. But let's start with a bucket and say, the way we talk, like today, we're talking about blockchain and related technologies at this event. So let's start with the idea of a conversation, like this conversation we're having right now. Let's do the digital analog of that conversation. And so when Jay sent out the invite, instead of having to go to meetup.com, create the conversation for today's event. Put where it's going to be, that's your geographic data. Put when it's going to be, that's your calendar data. Put tasks that need to be accomplished before, during, and after the event. There's your task management data. Put all this stuff, put some documents to review beforehand, some common notes and things. What does blockchain mean? What's a Merkle DAG? What's the history of the internet? Go for all this kind of stuff. Put that all in one place, basically a Git repo. And then Jay can then add the rest of the people who might be here, or we can, if it's a public conversation, we can discover it, add ourselves. And instead of putting it on a server somewhere, let's synchronize that data between whoever wants a copy. And now each copy is fully sufficient. Like if you have that copy, it doesn't matter if you have network access, you can find where it is on the map, you can read the docs, the preliminary information, you can adjust tasking data, mark tasks as complete, reassign them to other people. The only time you now need the network is to exchange data, to push and pull data from other repos. And we get those advantages with Git. So what we need is a standardized way of representing this information. And I'm looking at the old MIME types, which had a pseudo-hierarchical explanation. They're text/plain, text/HTML. If we mirror that and just toss that in a Git repo, we now have this very backwards compatible way of modeling this. And that's the thing I was planning on working today is a front end that would allow you to visualize, really, really easily visualize for a normal person who's not going to want to learn all this, a Git repo that's been augmented with these types of data and do auto check-ins at same points. And then I have a separate project that's the back end to actually transmit this data. And that could also be re-implemented in IPFS. And I was hoping Christian was going to be here because I think he already did
hoping he would be here too.
Quite a bit of work on just doing just that, an
Wow.
IPFS backend for synchronizing. So now, again, I don't want the pain that I have right now of having to dig through piles of email and trying to, okay, that person's asking me to do this. So then I have to go add that to my task manager. And then there's so much work, just busy work that's being done. So to step way back for a sec, computers, tell me if anyone disagrees, but I believe we invented these things to save ourselves time and trouble. That's the fundamental reason for having these damn things. If they're not saving us time and trouble,
if the computers just didn't make mistakes,
Or leverage human capabilities. I would say it goes beyond saving time and trouble to be able to augment our productivity and our reach and our capabilities.
Actually, SharePoint intention was that.
We
If you
invented
think
these
about
things because somebody was having fun.
No,
That's
if
right.
you look at, if you go back to Charles Babbage,
Faster.
if you go back to Charles Babbage, they had rooms full of women that were the computers. They would literally sit there and do
Yeah.
computations.
They were literally
create-
called computers.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
their job,
Yeah.
to compute.
And so he's like, this is a crap way to do this. It'd be way nicer. if
Well,
we
the
invented a
room full
machine.
of women's were a little later than Babbage. They were more about artillery ballistics, and they weren't quite contemporaneous to Babbage.
They were really good at it, too.
But,
That was-
but nonetheless,
Okay.
Can we agree that like anything that's been invented in the world was just to free up human beings to do some other task?
No, the inverse.
no,
Anything that
it
was
may be
invented
to
in the
be able
world
to do tasks that were otherwise
designed to
impossible.
Take up human time. It then gets justified to free up human time. But it was originally created so somebody had something to do that they liked. Whether it was math or figuring
But I
out
would also
stars.
say it's to be able to do tasks you couldn't do as a human with pen and paper. I mean,
Well, I mean, it used to be that human beings were the machines to do the work with building or digging something,
sure.
and the same with animals. So I mean, that's just like the whole thing going through engineering and like building.
Yeah, but then there was the leisure class, and they were the ones who had the money, and they were the ones who wanted to impress each other and were bored and wanted to figure out what to do. They're the ones who invented the computers.
The Jacquard
Well,
loom.
Let's
Yeah.
let's dial it back a little bit.
Uh,
So
you-
actually, so again,
Yeah.
I think the discussion like we were having, the point I was trying to make was there's a practical aspect and then there is a
Yeah.
utopian
theoretical
aspect.
aspect.
Right, and again, so in the practical aspect, you have one use case. I mean, that's the use case that you are passionate about.
Well, yeah. So that's
Right.
one. That's something I think we could get an alpha or maybe even a beta done today. So I'm going to work on that because I'm at the point where computers are costing me more time than they're saving me right now. And to me, that's just so wrong, so objectionable. Like they're going against their fundamental reason, I think, for existing. So I want to fix that.
So
Okay, so let me explain what I'm trying to do.
yeah, I think that's the intersection. I
Yeah.
think we really need to build out.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I'm the practical guy here.
yeah.
So here's what I have been trying to do, kind of in parallel with Jay's doing. From the very beginning that I got involved with this, my thinking was that I would create a set of demos that would entertain just one idea and one demo. I would grab all the demos that are being done at all these other blockchain meetings, and it would just show you one idea. Because in order to do this blockchain, there's a lot of big ideas that are going on, and everybody can just go nuts because your mind is going because of it.
Yeah.
But if you can show one demo at a time that can be repeated, and you have a framework of saying, these are the demos, go try it out yourself with the scientific method and all that stuff. Now, all of a sudden, everybody says, oh, this is something you can do. This is something that's cool. Maybe this is something you can use right now to help you. So a good example of that is I have a list of all of the meetups that have occurred for IPFS so far and blockchain, and all the videos that go with it, all the way back to like February when the guy from the Internet Archive said, yeah, we should really fix or lock the web open. And they threw it out there as
That's
saying,
great
okay,
article.
we're going to fix all of the original sins of the internet design. So what I started doing was collecting all these demos, some of which disappeared, which is really the irony of all that, because they're.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to do is grab a hold of all of this stuff and say, here's these demos. Is this thing real? And then kind of smoke out the open source versus decoy source, and say this is what. So the first demo that the Internet Archive guy did after he kind of threw it up there in his 5-minute speech.
Yeah.
Was he took a BitTorrent, grabbed in his speech with all the links, created one giant BitTorrent file, and his demo was, instead of one file, I grab one file, but inside of it, you can actually search within that file because he's using, a Merkle DAG inside of it, and an implemented blockchain inside of BitTorrent. Now that's a stupid computer trick I can use. So that's what I've been trying to do. And so, like, for instance, I'm thinking of having like all my demos be implemented in, inside of Docker, and so people can just pull it in, try it out. Doesn't cost them anything.
Mhm.
and off they go. And then separate from that would be, okay, if you can implement it in a virtual machine, you can implement as many places you want, and then you can throw it on hardware like a Raspberry Pi and all that. So that is my goal as far as teaching myself what the hell this is about and smoking out the bullshit from the actual usage. Is that kind of close to what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
like because it's like, yeah, we can all get caught up in like all the complications
The
of
research,
blockchain. Yeah, so I think like we could spend a whole day of just talking about it and getting nowhere. But to your point, like something that tangible that you can take, and even if that happens to be 2% of the overall knowledge, but that is 2% that you can hold on to, that should be the way we can promote it. Even your point of like ocean, like information, and then you're coming to a hierarchy where it is again you can hold on to it again at the same.
It's
What
a
is that?
practical thing that you can actually use it. There's an end goal in mind.
Right. So what is that? What is your use case? Is there a use case you have in your mind that you could apply and use?
Well, so like the work I do is getting rid of all this morality, or right or wrong, good or bad, and it's just dealing with fact. And this is the facts of things, and this is what you could possibly do. And really, it's just a choice to you. There's no right or wrong, and just presenting those options.
That, and we might be able to model that using some of these techniques. Do you have anything concrete beyond that general use case that you'd like to work on today?
I didn't come here for the afternoon to work on that. And if I come in here to do that, I would make sure it's very specific, especially not to give away like specific trade secrets of how to do some of this stuff.
So, thank you, Adam. Elio, you've got a project, right? You've got something in mind to work on this afternoon. Bill, you've got something to work on in mind.
I'll never run out of stuff to do.
All right. So you know, Bill, that you can spin up a VM out of IPFS.
Yeah, that's really cool. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So that's something you'd like to. That sounds like that's along the lines of what you're interested in doing.
Right.
Today. Okay. So you want to spin up a VM and maybe do some other things with IPFS. You want to take the front end of Nebula and
I've had a lot of discussions with a number of people around town, and the one thing that I haven't quite solved, like all the other bits are actually pretty easy. All the technologies existed for decades. It's really writing glue code to tie them together. But the unsolved bit, and goes back to what Maximo and I were talking about, adoption. If you build this amazing distributed system that can solve all these issues in security and ontology, et cetera, how do you get people to use it? And you can put a good UI on it, which is one thing that I plan to do and explore. I don't know. I disagree with the monetary motive, though. I think that we were just talking about that the other day, especially programmers tend not to be motivated by money. And that's by far a subset of humanity. But
if money is separate from the technology, you're right. And that's the paradigm that we've worked with in the past. And what I'm suggesting is that money, the new paradigm that we're moving into, this is part and parcel with this. And we don't.
You're saying it's a token rather than a value.
Well, money.
Well,
rather than.
But the part that I'd really, really like to emphasize is I think this quote blockchain realm is driven by, there's a monetary component that's driving it. And it's going to go faster than, it's going to go really, really fast.
Yeah.
We've seen it with Ethereum. We've seen it with Bitcoin.
Yep.
And so
there's a community element as well. And I'm fine with working with it, Nebula or whatever in a non-monetary sense, but even IPFS has a monetary element that's designed to be an exchange of information and value and all that.
Refresh my memory. Which part was
It's
that?
called Filecoin. But there's a whole monetary element that's in the wings around IPFS. And part of what I'm asking everybody to consider here today is that monetary element is analogous to, we used to get from A to B on bicycles. Now there's something that's got fuel associated with it. And it's that fuel, the money part, that I think is really going to drive it.
And I think that
and I'm fine. I'm fine if you want to do it without the money. All I'm asking everybody to consider is the money element, I think, is the powerful driver around this. So anyway,
Jay, I think you were alluding to what your goal were about some identity management. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you are thinking?
Yeah, I don't want to. My project isn't far enough along. I think for this group to work on, and I'm not far enough along technically, but the identity management part is basically creating a list of addresses that you own your address, you own your collection of email addresses, Skype names, all that stuff, and it works in harmony. But I don't see us. Thanks for bringing it up. But and we have worked on a little bit of that already.
And I'm not even going to get into. We have an ongoing disagreement about that. We'll set that aside right now.
I have anyway.
Yeah. How about you folks? How about you two folks here? Do you have any specific use cases that you are exploring or?
Well, I was interested in the Slack thing when I found it this morning.
The what?
Yeah.
But in terms of a project that we would do
Ethereum
live,
computer guy.
right?
From a practical implementable project, I think some at least a couple of folks have very clear goals.
No, I didn't have it.
Mine aren't that clear either.
I didn't have a use case.
Okay, so maybe rather than coming up with some new stuff, what I've been looking at was what are the problems that need to be fixed. So that's what the Internet Archive guy was talking about February last year. He's saying, what is broken on the internet? And he felt that after looking at all the problems that we had, the so-called original sins, that we have enough technologies isolate from each other that if we integrated it all, it would be really cool. That solves the problem of the internet. So if you break it down into the problems associated with the internet and then talk about the individual technologies that can fix one thing at a time. So one example would be the idea of having centralized versus distributed web.
Mm-hmm.
That's a completely separate thing from saying that if you have Bitcoin and you associate it with every file like it was metadata, that every time you pass some guy a file, he would have the ability to figure out how to charge him. And then separate from that is cryptography, where you can actually take the data and make sure that you're the only person that's supposed to be and that it's exactly what you expected it to be. Right? And then the third thing would be, let's say, GitHub, where you keep track of all the commits and then you can keep track of all the revisions. And when you get a gobbledygook number of a commit, you can then go get the stuff, figure out where the rest of it is, and figure out all the versions that came before it. Mm-hmm. Those are all different ideas that if you take them all together and put it into one system, you would fix the internet. But all these problems are trying to figure out at different points the big giant tile that is the internet today.
Ocean.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What's that?
He called it the ocean, which was, I think,
The ocean.
ocean, yeah.
Similarly full of plastic. But anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
I actually had that image.
The vision I have was that painting that I forgot the name of the guy that was the Tower of Babel. That was in one of the pictures.
Bosch.
Yeah, Bosch. And
Hieronymus Bosch.
yeah, that big Tower of Babel picture. I don't know. I actually went during my honeymoon. I actually drive up to the place and got that actual picture.
Wow.
That was in Fred Brooks's Mythical Man Month. We have this big pile, and people aren't talking to each other, and that's why. And it turns out Babel actually existed. I didn't know that. It actually was a real thing.
You have any specific use case as well?
So one of the things that caught my attention is how blockchain could be used to make more transparent governments through the use of smart contracts. So I don't really have a specific project. I would really want to learn more about the application of the smart contracts, like what they are and how to use it. Are we already using that, or is that a thing? Is that a thing still in theory?
No,
That's
it's
what
being
No, I think they're doing a
implemented.
smart contract for voting. So there are people trying to do voting
Yeah,
on blockchain.
the Ethereum platform is using smart contracts as well as distributed autonomous organizations, which is like a company that basically exists using the blockchain and directives and so forth, kind of wind it up and let it go. And I would love to get into Ethereum. That would be, I don't even know how to start on Ethereum. But,
Can you open up and just maybe we'll go through Ethereum a little bit and understand?
Sure. But Ethereum, exploring Ethereum this afternoon would be valuable to me.
Jay, while you're doing that, I can confirm that your instincts are correct because did you see the big announcement from IBM in terms of they're doing a very large blockchain effort?
You're right.
In the cloud,
Yeah, IBM is doing it. That means they're hearing a lot from their clients base. They want blockchain. And in terms of using blockchain with voting, I think has the potential to intercept a big problem because digital voting is proving to be a playground of fraud. But also, I think blockchain would be very useful in terms of legislative agenda. If you could put the creation and changes of a law as it moves through the legislature in version control, if you could say, who started this, who changed it, where did this, who proposed the change that made Puerto Rico unable to to go through bankruptcy? Who did that? Because they looked at it, it was in a law, nobody knows where it came from. That might be an opportunity to use blockchain in a government context. And it might also be a really good way to discipline those in government as our representatives by saying, if you want to create a law, we want version control, logs, and transparency, who committed what sentence. You might need to pass a initiative to make that happen.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
So I didn't say it would be easy, I just said it would be interesting.
No, I think even good luck. I think the point I think is very important right there. We said good luck with that concept. Like I think we're all driving towards democracies, and we're trying to kind of build the transparency, and we're trying to kind of have all that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think why is that so hard? Is that if I'm going to my bank and my money is there, and you're checking my credit score to give me money in that context. So I think what is missing in this democratic aspect of it is that a similar score in terms of their legislative or administrative or whatever score that you could assign it to that process.
Now you're getting to the bigger idea of digital identity, which is another aspect of Nebula, is strong digital identity that's not tied to one provider, that's tied to the individual.
Right.
So,
and that's a key element of what I'm interested in is identity management.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, Ethereum, one of the founders of Ethereum made the point on a recent podcast that they're only interested in three things. Number one is communication. Number two is identity. And number three is payments. Those are their three.
What was it? Can you go again?
It was communication, identity, and payments. And this is by Anthony Diorio, and it was on Epicenter Bitcoin. But let's dial it back just a little bit. Microsoft in the Azure has Ethereum as a blockchain as a service. I
Canadian thing.
I haven't
I
played
love.
with this.
I just love when people centralize a decentralized service. Look,
Yeah.
we have a
Wow.
centralized version of the decentralized service.
Well,
Awesome.
But-
We just
but that's
negated
how-
all of the.
But it's a non-free version of a free operating system.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
love it. I love
Yeah,
it.
but that's how they work. They go announce something and say, yeah, we're part of it. Give me everything and let me see if I can monetize it. They do that with Linux today, right?
Yeah,
They go in and announce that, oh yeah, well, we're just gonna throw in,
we're gonna take back.
we'll
just
put
the
in
shell,
bash,
one of
therefore
the
we're a
shells.
bunch of Linux guys.
Yeah.
Come on,
I
give
say
me
why
a break.
stop there? Just install Linux and be done with it.
Yeah, and it's not even workable yet. I mean,
Yeah.
So I've used, I don't know, I've used Cygwin for
Because
decade.
the political
Cygwin is a bash on Windows,
yeah.
pretty much.
So we've got options. We
Yeah.
played.
It's like
we
I'm
played
like,
around. We've got
is it
some
news?
expertise with multi-chain, which is a blockchain, permission blockchain that we could create.
Which is closed source.
Yeah,
Which is closed source.
It's
Yeah.
interesting but dysfunctional.
It's
Yeah.
interesting but dysfunctional because it's closed source, which is a
Major. Yeah. I think
a
anything.
signal. And
Yeah.
I've emphasized multi-chain in the past, but I'm not emphasizing it now because it is closed source and it's open source.
Yeah.
Say all for it.
Well, same thing with BitTorrent. I mean, it's not bad technology, but it's closed source. So
It could be worse. It could be decoy
we could
source.
play around with Microsoft
yeah, I think
their
that is,
platform. We could play around with this newly released IBM blockchain platform.
You see how deceptive these guys are?
Yeah, reputationally speaking, I think anything from Microsoft should be ignored.
I know I have
And-
friends that work
and-
there, but
The other thing that we could
That
do, because
company.
we've got this set up and it's operating, is we could play with IPFS.
yeah, IPFS is really interesting. It's again, they for whatever reason managed to catch on. There've been a ton of other similar projects, but they've done. I have a lot of respect for Juan Bennett. I've watched his Stanford
yeah.
talk, especially. They're not just a bunch of guys who are like, oh, let's slap some minimum viable product together.
Okay.
Yeah, these guys are for real. Yeah.
Yeah, it's IPFS. I think it's .io. Yeah, that trendy IO domain screwing those little islands out of all that money.
But lately they've got hooked into Ethereum now, so they're going to end up like being absorbed
Well,
by the.
What's that?
Yes and no. There's
Diego Garcia.
there's a dance going on between Ethereum and IPFS, and a lot of people are combining the
Oh.
two. And I'd like to play with both of them working together because Ethereum's already got a monetary element to it.
Yeah.
But IPFS on its own, I think, from what I know about IPFS, I think it could possibly replicate what Ethereum's doing. I
Oh
could
yeah.
be wrong on that.
So IPFS. Does anyone familiar? Does anyone want a
No.
brief intro to IPFS?
yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, that
Okay.
would be, because
yeah, well, maybe we ought to do that after lunch. Is just
Okay.
an intro
I can give
to
a very
IPFS.
brief 5-minute intro right now. IPFS is a global Merkle DAG plus a DHT. That's all it is. Think of it like a magic hat that you have this huge magic hat you can stick any file in, and anyone else, if they know the right number, can pull that file out anywhere else in the world. So it's a Merkle DAG, a globally distributed Merkle DAG with a distributed hash table that allows any person to. So you put something into it, it turns it into a Merkle DAG. You can put in an entire Merkle DAG. There's commands for actually committing entire directory trees.
So are they URLs or URIs?
They
They're
are,
URIs.
I think,
But
URI. So they're
You
actually the
can use
hash.
both.
it sounds
Okay.
like the perfect receptacle for semantic web objects.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sound.
That's exactly right.
Yes. So that's all it is, though. It's missing identity management. That would be totally separate. It has ways of pinning data so that you can pin within a certain node a piece of data, and that data won't be evicted out of that node for any reason. But it lacks the idea of global data management, which is something I'd like to add in Nebula on top of this, or in addition, instead of whatever. There's no built-in cryptography. It's kind of bring your own crypto.
Okay.
So it's great for public data right now, but without putting some kind of crypto and identity management framework with this, it's not completely suitable for private data. So right now you have to figure out how you're going to handle private data, like how you're going to encrypt it, how you're going to let other people know, all that kind of stuff. So
So how are people letting other people know what exists?
So they make a really interesting distinction in IPFS between mutable and immutable data, which is important. And so anything that's referred to by checksum is immutable data. You can never change it because that checksum, if you change even one bit, the
It's
whole
a different
checksum
set.
changes.
It's different database.
So when you check something in by checksum, that's immutable. But obviously, you may have a web page that is your blog, and every time you add an article, now that checksum to the top level of the blog changes. So they have a thing they built called IPNS, which is a name service that lets you, based on identity, you can take your identity. There's some level of support for your node ID, and you can say, person who owns this node has tied this identifier to this current immutable version, and they can change that over time.
So
They can update
again, if we were all doing it,
Mhm.
would I want to do something similar to RSS to know what's happening with the other 7 people?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you can totally
and that's one of the
do
things
something.
I'm working on. So what happens is that it's the equivalent of RSS with a GitHub thing behind it. So you would get a URL and you'd get an RSS feed with that URL or URI or whatever you call it,
Okay.
which is just a big long gobbledygook. But but IPFS can interpret that and tell you, okay, that link or that website, I can tell you all the versions that came before it.
Okay, so is it tribal? I mean, do I invite
Well-
people? Do I invite people in, or
Here are some demo or example apps.
Yeah, that's what I'm
One,
saying. Yeah.
Number 2 is Boards, which is a distributed social platform that runs in the browser. Somebody's already built something along those lines. And then here is Orbit, which I'd like to do, which is a distributed peer-to-peer chat application on IPFS. And Juan Bennett was at he was at MIT like last week, and they did something with this Orbit project, where I think they actually demoed it. So I don't think it would take that long to do Orbit. But here's a whole list of, there's a wiki, there's, this thing, this.
Yeah, and the nice thing about IPFS, this website you're looking at, this is GitHub, but the actual IPFS.io website, they have definitely addressed transitionary concerns. So they wrote a gateway so that you can host stuff. Like their website is actually in IPFS itself. When you go to that website, it checks to see what the newest version in IPFS is and acts as a gateway and then pulls that and serves that over HTTP.
Yeah.
So really nice. It's very, very
Yeah, that's really
compatible
Yeah.
with the web itself until it's more widely available. The actual protocol, rather, is more widely available. So
Well, and to get back to your point about why, there's nothing really new in IPFS, but I think that backward compatibility is a big factor. that
Yeah.
Makes it, worth the time to play around
Yeah, and
with.
it fixes problems. So each of those little examples that they have fixes a specific problem.
yeah, and
But
again,
if you take all of the combination of all these things that they're fixing, then you've got something really powerful.
yeah, and there's been stuff like this. Again, Freenet has been doing similar stuff with a much heavier emphasis on privacy and anonymity for 15 years. They've been live, not just designed, but actually live and running globally. But Freenet has some distinct disadvantages because of their heavy emphasis on privacy and anonymity. They intentionally de-optimize things that IPFS isn't worried about those same attack models. So they just ignore those and they optimize for performance.
Would it
So
would it be of interest to you, Elio? See that fourth project?
which one? Get IPFS rehost?
Right. Would that be of interest to you
I don't know.
in
To
the
look at it.
Nebula context? See, you're talking about, a Git
This is the awesome IPFS repo.
structure. Well, maybe what we should do, where are you at, Bill, in terms of do you think it's feasible to get something that works within an hour or two this afternoon?
Yeah, I can probably show what I have or what the idea is. I think a lot of people, I mean, do you want to focus on solving specific problems? Because that's all I'm trying to do right now is, okay, well, I'm just going to fix one thing at a time.
I think we want something that works within an hour or two.
Yeah. Oh, well, maybe we could just go through the same examples IPFSI already has. You know, like the
So
the browser and all
I don't
the
know
rest
if you're
of that.
interested, but one thing that I haven't done yet, I've been putting it off because I just feel like it's not going to be the fun part, is playing with GPG and trying to figure out how to make some of the, because the crypto's solid in GPG and the web of trust idea that goes back decades is that's the way you do identity, but making that more approachable to a normal user, making that so a mere mortal can master, because they've done several write-ups, even people who have years of experience, decades of experience in computing, when they ask them just to quickly set up a new GPG identity, they botch it.
Okay.
So the UI around GPG, even though the tech is solid and the crypto is awesome, the UI is awful.
Oh yeah,
So
it's all command line.
So
and
that
all-
would be
yeah.
a big thing, is how do you figure out how to wrap that in something that makes it accessible to the normal human being. And there are reasons they've done multiple level keys and all this. There's a need for that. It's not arbitrarily in there, but making it so a normal human can digest that and, you know, click through a few boxes and set up a strong cryptographic identity. That would be a huge thing.
Yeah.
So
But there's already apps
it is
for that.
insane. Even in that context, if you see most of the communication, like, you know, I see people, the use case, very simple use case for that kind of model is for all the normal CPAs or all the normal doctors or like, you know, people in that kind of industry where they're completely, you know, strict risk management is in place, but the tools are not in place. So I actually like that concept because it is something very tangible. We can build a value together and say, like, we can go and use in our own backyards and say, like, no, hey, why don't you guys give it a shot? And if this helps, and you can convert it into even monetary side, you could convert that into more monetary aspect to it. And then that's the way you can grow this group right there. I mean, like, something very tangible.
Yeah, and that I need that for Nebula, IPFS. Again, bring your own crypto. So without that, a way to manage your identity, it's not nearly as useful without that. I mean, there's so many things that if someone were to crack that nut and, you know, make GPG accessible to normal people, that's a huge, that's, if not the biggest stumbling block toward any of these efforts, that's a major one.
Well, it sounds to me like if we had two projects for this afternoon, like we split into two groups, and, you know, just go for it. Give it a couple hours and see what you can come up with in a couple hours.
Just run
and
some
then
demos. Yeah.
We'll make two groups.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ed.
I've kind of brought a project of my own. I've got a BeagleBone Black, and what I hope to do is put a stack on it, Fedora, and then IPFS, and see if I can get that up and running. Hopefully, that can get done, you know, as we finish lunch.
Okay.
But then we might, you know, that might have an IPFS stack to play with.
Sure, that'd be good, because we get 2 boxes back there, 2 Raspberry Pis that have IPFS on them, so we could play around with getting your BeagleBone Black to talk to those.
Yeah,
and
just as an example
Yeah.
of how to work with it. I don't know if that would be kind of in support of some of these other.
Yeah, that would be cool if you can aggregate different things and come up with even one that is working in an hour or two. That would be ideal. Personally, actually, I don't have full time today to hang on to. I've invited a bunch of people at home, so my wife will probably manage.
Okay, well, and maybe we'll get to that today, and maybe we won't. Maybe we'll have to push it off till July, but or one of the monthly sessions. But that's really the way this day is designed. Is, you know, we talk in the morning, we exchange some ideas, have lunch, and then hack on something for an hour or two and call it a day. So here's the pizzas. I'm going to turn off the recording, and then we'll resume after lunch. And
Okay.
Good.
All right. Thanks for your time and attention. Hope this was interesting to you. And we will resume after lunch for the afternoon Team Hack Attack. Bye.